Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to warmly welcome you all virtually to this side event organized by the Asian and Pacific Center for Development of Disaster Information Management under the title Sun and Dust Storm Risk Assessment in Asia and the Pacific, Potential for Concerted Action at Regional Level to Reduce Risk and Strengthen Resilience. I appreciate very much your taking the time to join us in this event. I would like now to hand over to Ms. Letizia Rossano, Director of APDIM, to proceed with this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Good morning, everyone. It is my great pleasure really, to welcome you all to this side event, where we will launch the first region-wide multi-sector risk assessment of sand and dust storms in the Asia and Pacific region. And I'm most honored that our Executive Secretary, Ibu Armida Alice Jabana, kindly agreed to deliver opening remarks at our event. And I see Ibu Armida is online, and I see you're kind of joining us as we go, which is great. Ibu Armida, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Letizia. Very good morning, good afternoon to distinguished participants, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to address the side event on the seventh session of ESCAP Committee on DRR, or Disaster Risk Reduction, Coordinate Regional Action on Sun and Dust Storms. Implication of Sun and Dust Storms Risk Assessment in Asia and the Pacific. With the wide-ranging implication of COVID-19 and the threat of climate change coming or looming, as highlighted by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recent report, it is even more compelling to adopt and apply multi-hazard, inclusive and solution-oriented approaches for disaster risk reduction. Disasters recognize no borders, no boundaries, and therefore regional cooperation and partnership play a critical role in achieving measurable results for sustainable development. Sun and dust storms seriously affect several areas in the world, including in our region, Asia Pacific. APDIM report, which we are going to launch soon, titled Sun and Dust Storm Risk Assessment in Asia Pacific, reveals that sun and dust storms pose risk to both society and environment and directly threaten achievement of SDG 11 11 of the 17 SDG goals, yeah? So majority of SDG goals directly threatened by sun and dust storm. So the report demonstrates that the cumulative effect of sun and dust storm on society are significant, and they are more frequent than most other types of natural hazards, and their impacts are highly complex. The findings of this assessment indicate that millions of people in the region are exposed to medium and high levels of poor air quality due to this sun and dust storm. Sun and dust storm make a significant contribution to poor air quality, for example, in Karachi, Lahore, and Delhi, where nearly 60 million people experience more than 170 dusty days a year in 2019. So that's just one example, yeah? In agriculture, more than 70% of farms in Turkmenistan and nearly half of the farmlands in Pakistan and Uzbekistan are exposed to sun and dust storm. In the environment, glaciers in the Himalaya, Hindu Kush mountain range, and Tibetan plateau, which provides fresh water to more than 1.3 billion people in the region, are exposed to sun and dust storm, which could impact the hydrologic regime of the area and consequently make an impact on water security, drought, flood, agriculture. The report focused on one component of the energy sector, which is the solar power plant. It is estimated that sun and dust storms are responsible for economic losses of hundreds of millions of dollars annually in India, China, and Pakistan, just to name a few, yeah, of the countries highly impacted. ESCAP, in this regard, the Regional Institute of ESCAP, APDIM, contributes to building a shared understanding amongst the countries in our region about the common threats of hazards. Still, we are also ready to support regional cooperation and facilitate joint action to reduce the risk and negative impact of sun and dust storm. This report identifies 3 broad areas where regional cooperation would be especially important, and I warmly encourage all countries in the region, especially those affected, to building on these findings and work on solutions together, and especially on the following aspects. The first one is a deeper understanding of the socio-economic impact of sun and dust storm. The report scratched the surface of the problem. We need to dig deeper together and fully understand the impact at the national level in most affected countries, especially for those most at risk and vulnerable segment of the population. Secondly, a coordinated monitoring and early warning system with an impact-based focus to timely forecast sun and dust storm and enable targeted measures to minimize exposure and reduce risk. It is a transboundary hazard that requires coordinated work at regional as well as sub-regional levels to predict and act timely to reduce the worst impact, especially for example, in the health sector, even more so. Now we have this COVID pandemic. Third, coordinated action in most at-risk and exposed geographical areas to mitigate the risk. The risk of sun and dust storm highlighted the critical nexus in disaster, climate, and health, which is also one of the focus, or the primary focus actually, of the committee on DRR. So therefore, we must do better collectively to mitigate and reduce the risk through ad hoc risk reduction measures. The 77th session of the Commission requested the Secretariat to promote regional cooperation to implement the health aspect of the Sendai framework, including those reflected in the Bangkok Principles. The intersection of COVID-19 pandemic with climate extremes and hazards, such as sun and dust storm and other biological hazards, means that future disaster risk reduction and management planning will need to include multi-hazard disaster risk assessment, monitoring, early warning, response, and recovery. So colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 crisis has adversely impacted the functions and services of many organizations at the national, regional, and international or global levels. The support of regional and international institutions to help countries and communities and facilitate regional cooperation is needed more than ever. ESCAP stands ready to extend its full support and cooperation to the countries of the region to build back better from the current COVID crisis and reduce the risk of future disaster. I extend my appreciation and thanks to APDIM team, Leticia and team, for contributing to deepening our understanding of the risk of sun and dust storm in the region. Even more importantly, I thank member states, partner regional, international organizations, and all stakeholders and experts who joined this collective effort and contributed significantly to this analysis into the risk and negative impacts of sun and dust storm. I wish you a very successful site event. And again, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Armida. Thank you so much for your kind words. May I ask you then to officially launch the report?
Yes, so it is with pleasure that I formally launch the report again. Maybe I'll just show the report. Yeah, to take the picture.
Yes.
Yes, titled again, Sun and Dust Storm Risk Assessment in Asia and the Pacific. Again, congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I ask everyone, Ibu, if you don't mind, just 1 second, everyone to turn on their cameras so we can take a nice group photo with the report and Ibu Armida with us. Just 1 second, everyone. Thank you. Smile for the cameras. Thank you. Ava, did we get what we need? Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Ibu. Thank you. And with that, we bid farewell to our Executive Secretary and move on to the more substantive session of a substantive part of the discussion. And I believe my colleague will be sharing with you in the chat box the link to the report on our website. So the need for an overview on the impact of sand and dust storms as an evidence base on which to build regional action was discussed at the expert group meeting that we held actually in the margins of the last DRR committee in 2019. So it's really timely and quite, it has a nice segue that we launched the actual report at this committee, on the margins of this committee. And it is our hope really and our commitment that going forward, that the analysis that we produce and the evidence we are presenting in this report will facilitate conversations on cross-boundary collaborations towards better understanding, as well as tackling the impact of sand and dust storms in the region. I should also mention that as we started working on this report, things kept happening and kept building up in terms of our involvement on the subject matter. And as part of our involvement, APDIM's involvement in the UN Coalition on Sand and Dust Storms, and therefore our collaboration grew even more with other organizations, including the World Meteorological Organizations, and we have a distinguished speaker later in this panel, the UN Convention on Desertification and Food and Agriculture Organizations, UNEP, as well as we recently held, for example, a cross-regional online discussion with our colleagues in ESCAP on sand and dust storms to really understand how our analysis could also inform discussions of a cross-regional nature. And we also developed, as we worked on this analysis, we realized that there wasn't enough evidence on which to build the analysis, and we really encourage countries to start reporting systematically on the impact of sand and dust storms through an established framework like the Sendai framework. And so we developed guidelines for countries to report on the impact of sand and dust storm through the Sendai framework, and these are available on our website. So as you can see, this study was a very complex endeavor that required collaboration and interaction with several partners. But in particular, I would like to mention a few that are here with us this morning who really accompanied us over the last year and a half, hand in hand really, on almost daily basis to help us with the production, the actual drafting, analysis, cracking some of the algorithms and the formulas, etc. So I'd like to mention this morning Alad Mansuru from the Statistics Division of ESCAP, Yoshia Toge from Tohoku University, whom you will hear from briefly, Sarah Bassard from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center and the Sand and Dust Storm Warning Advisory System node for North Africa and Middle East, Nick Middleton from Oxford University, who was really very much involved in the production in the last phase of the report, Athanasios Votis from the University of Twente, Netherlands, and the Finnish Meteorological Institute. Sorry, my screen just, yes. Aurelio Tobias from the Spanish Council of Scientific Research in Spain, and Sanjay Srivastava from our own ESCAP IDD section. So the report has a very detailed acknowledgement section, and I would really warmly suggest that you take a look at it, because really we couldn't have done it without everyone. So with this perhaps lengthy introduction, it is my great pleasure to now give the floor to the lead author and coordinator of the report, Amin Shamseddini, who's a program officer in APDIM, who will deliver the presentation along with Professor Yoshia Toge from Tohoku University, who contributed very much to the analysis. So Amin, over to you.
Thank you, Letizia. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. Let me share my screen. Okay. Hope everybody can see my screen. Can anyone confirm?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, great. If you have lived in any arid or semi-arid area, you have of course experienced sand and dust storm, or what you might call dusty weather. The overall aim of this publication and report is to increase our understanding of the impact of this phenomenon to facilitate conversation at a regional level toward increased resilience. The analysis we did for this assessment underscored that there is still a significant gap between the research and the knowledge at technical level and its application at the policy and investment level. This study, as Letizia mentioned, is strategically important for us in APDIM, not only because of the actual issue at hand, but also because of the remarkable experience of working closely with multiple partners, and we hope to replicate this model of broad collaboration with international scientific partners in future as well. Now, let me start with the content of the report. This report is organized into 5 chapters. In chapter 1, an introduction on sand and dust storm in Asia and the Pacific. It's linked to SDGs and intergovernmental mandates. The second chapter is about the methodology, in which we explain the risk framework and how we measure risk in various sectors. The third one, basically the core chapter, is sectoral risk analysis. Chapter 4 is on the projection of sand and dust storm in the region and the economic loss. And the last chapter, chapter 5, is actually the findings of the report, as well as the suggested next step for coordinated regional action on sand and dust storms. In order to find out a practical methodology to conduct this assessment, we held, as Letizia mentioned, we held at very beginning, in collaboration with the World Meteorological Organization, a focused technical workshop, which focusing precisely on the possible methodology. We brought in experts from various backgrounds, including risk modelers, experts from on sand and dust storm, and socioeconomists. And later, we continue this discussion with many of them. In this study, various sectors were considered, including agriculture, energy, particularly solar energy, and then environment, health, cities, and transport, particularly on the aviation sector. To do the assessment, we use the risk concept from disaster risk reduction and also the concept of vulnerability from climate change adaptation approaches, and try to taking the best of both. And we selected indicators and layers for each component of each sector. And whenever the data and methodology was available, we tried to assess the risk. And for some sectors, actually, we calculate exposure only. And now a quick look at the data sources. For hazard, we used the MERA2 reanalysis dataset at the ground level as well as the cruise elevation for aviation. And based on the way and the mechanism of impact of sand and dust storm on various sectors, we decided to use various thresholds and indicators for each sector. With the support of Tohoku University, we extracted a hazard layer for each and all sectors. For example, for energy sector, we use the average annual dust deposition, which covers the power plant and reduce the efficiency. For the human health, another example, we use the average daily dust concentration, which where it exceeded 50 microgram per cubic meter, according to what WHO guideline suggested. For the data on various sector, exposure, sensitivity, and resilience, we use some open source data, as well as we reach out to a specialized organization. and offices that you can see in the slide. For agriculture and environment sector, we use the land cover map, which was produced based on the MODIS images. For energy, we use the data set of Asia Pacific Power Plant of ESCAP. And for transport, we got data of airport and flight paths from OPS group, from OpenFlights. And for health, we from WHO, SEDAC, UNDP, World Bank, and for cities from UNDESA. For hazard layer, due to the complexity of analysis, as Letizia mentioned, and also due to the huge file that need a supercomputer to be handled, we reach out to Tohoku University, and Dr. Yoshia kindly accept to help us on this matter. Now I would like to invite Dr. Yoshia to briefly explain the methods he applied and also challenges of this work. Dr. Yoshia, floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Yoshia.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Yoshia Toge from Tohoku University, Japan. From my side, I will explain about our hazard analysis dataset and threshold. What we used for a dataset was a MIRA2 from NASA. This is a reanalysis data that combines the numerical simulation and the Earth observation at the same time. This is a freely open data from 1980 onward, and hourly data is available globally. And utilized variable here is the dust concentration and sedimentation. As Ami mentioned, in the most analysis, we use the surface layer data, but the only aviation sector, we use a higher level because this MIRA2 has 72 vertical profiles. So could you go to next slide? Okay, thank you very much. So here's a threshold for aviation. For aviation, we consider the two parts. One is about visibility, and second is about engine erosion. For visibility, we have the threshold as a 1,000 meter as a visibility. But what we can obtain from MIRA2 was a dust concentration. So we need to convert from this concentration to visibility using the empirical formulas. This figure shows the several empirical formulas compared in North Africa. And we found that this JU equation shown in pink is suitable for our analysis. So just we use it. For right side, about engine erosion, we did the average for each atmospheric dust concentration in the flight levels. This table shows each flight standard levels. And for example, in the cruise, we use the 175 hectopascal as the standard pressure level. So we just make average on that level. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Can you?
Yeah, it may take a few seconds.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So here's a threshold for human health. Threshold from human health was obtained from WHO guidelines. What we used was a 50 microgram per cubic meter. It was a threshold for 24 hours for PM10. So we calculated the number of days when PM10 concentration were higher than this 50 microgram per cubic meter. For energy sector, actually the impact on the energy sector is complicated, but the current assessment focus in particular on the reduction in energy production caused by dust deposition. This dust deposition data can be obtained from this dust sedimentation from MIRA2 data. So this is from end on my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yoshia, for the presentation and also for your great contribution to the assessment. Sand and dust storm directly affect 11 out of 17 SDG. You can see the affecting goals in this infographic. In human health, Sand and dust storm damage the human organs, particularly skin and lung. The impact of sand and dust storms is higher in vulnerable groups, including children, older adults, and people with pre-existing condition. In this study, we found out that more than 80% of the entire population of the entire Islamic Republic of Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan are exposed to some level of poor air quality. You can see the population at risk of sand and dust storm here in this map. The hazard layer was calculated based on WHO air quality air pollution guideline. And for the exposure component of the risk, we considered the population exposed to the sand and dust storm hazard. And for sensitivity, we use the subnational human development index and population of children and older adults in each pixel area. And as you can see, the highest number of people located in Pakistan, Islamic Republic of Iran, and China, where when we normalize the data with the total population per country, as you can see in this graph, Turkmenistan, Pakistan, and Uzbekistan show the highest level of exposure. The next one is urban areas. Although it's not a sector, but since a large amount of population in the region are living in comparatively small city areas, we consider city as well. The urban areas are packed with population, infrastructures, and services, which can negatively impact by sand and dust storms, impact on human health, interruption and pressure on services, including the health sector, closure of schools, airports, and many more. They are also can damage infrastructures. The other aspect of the sand and dust storm is cleaning cost, which in some cases and studies shows that is relatively big. We found out that cities in Southwestern Asia have the highest exposure to sand and dust storms, where nearly 60 million people experienced more than 170 dusty days in 2019. This graph shows the exposure of cities in Asia and the Pacific to sand and dust storm. We considered dust exposure in cities with a population higher than 300,000. In the map, you can see the population size and cities in different circle size, and the colors shows the level of exposure. And the graph shows the cities in Asia Pacific with the highest risk. The y-axis is the population and the population size, and the x-axis is the number of days per year that level of dust, the concentration is higher than what's WHO suggested, 50 microgram per cubic meter. And as you see, city of Ahwaz in the Islamic Republic of Iran and Hyderabad and Multan in Pakistan are exposed to dangerous level of dust for more than 2/3 of a year. Next is the energy sector. The most damage and loss is on solar panel and also wind energy, but of course other energy infrastructure are negatively impacting by sand and dust storms. As you can see in the infographic, sand and dust storm can absorb solar radiation. It increases the cost of maintenance by damaging the electrical and mechanical instruments. It increases the cost of cleaning, reduce energy production, particularly on solar power plant. We found out that the sand and dust storm have a considerable impact on the generation of electricity by solar power plant, which measure in economic terms is greater than $107 million a year in India, and also exceeded 46 million in China and 37 in Pakistan. This one shows the exposure and impact of sand and dust storm in the energy sector, particularly solar power plant. For this analysis, the indicator we used was the level of dust deposition, which covers the solar panels and reduces the efficiency of generator. And the map on the left shows the level of average dust deposition. The map on the right actually is the average amount of energy production based on the capacities of total solar power plant in each country and the percentage of energy lost due to efficiency reduction. The next sector is transport sector. Sand and dust storm also have a big impact on this sector by reducing visibility. It increased car accidents, traffic jam, and flight delay and cancellation. It damages to the vehicle surface due to erosion of sand and dust storm, and we can expect damage to aircraft engine, road surface, and traffic sign as well. From this assessment, we found out that the risk of flight delay and cancellation due to low visibility is greatest at airports in Central Asia, southern part of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the border area between Pakistan and India, and the northern part of China. Also, exposure of aircraft engines to dust particles is a considerable risk on flight paths traversing southwestern and central part of Asia, and flights to and from airports on the Arabian Peninsula, Pakistan, India, and China. As you see in the top left map, based on the dust concentration on the ground level, we estimated the visibility by considering the minimum visibility of 1,000 meters, as Yushia mentioned. We generated the hazard map for the sector. It's the average number of hours per year when the visibility dropped to less than a threshold of 1,000 meters. Since the airport have different navigation instruments, the resilience of each of them to sand and dust storm is obviously different. Therefore, we considered the navigation instrument for each airport. And so you can see the level of resilience in this map. The green area, the green dots basically shows the airports with the more advanced navigation instruments and therefore have higher resilience. By aggregating these values, we calculated the risk of flight cancellation, which can see in the map in the right, in the far right corner. To analyze the other mechanism of impact of sand and dust storm on aviation sector, engine erosion, since most of flight time are spent in the cruise elevation and not at the ground level, for hazard layer, we use the level of dust concentration in cruise elevation. We use the flight distance and duration, which make the level of exposure of engine to dust particles. The highest values are highlighted in the purple lined map. The next sector is agriculture. As you can see in the infographic, there are many ways that sand and dust storms impact this sector. It negatively impacts livestock and honey harvesting. It filling irrigation canals and cover pipelines, interrupt photosynthetic activities in crop by reducing the solar radiation, and also it causes loss of soil particles, nutrition, seeds, and fertilizers. It reduces soil and water quality as well, for example, by increasing the soil salinity. It damage to plants by sandblasting and root exposure, and it is damage to agricultural equipment as well. We found out that the large area of farmland are affected by dust deposition in Turkmenistan, more than 70%. And Pakistan, around half of them, and in Uzbekistan, around 44%. Here, you can see the exposure of agricultural land to dust deposition. To generate this map, we use the land cover map, which we generated based on the MODIS data and the land cover map available. Then we overlaid the average dust deposition and analyzed the area in which dust cover agricultural land. At the right side of your screen, you can see the exposure of agricultural land to average dust deposition in countries of Asia and the Pacific. The next sector is the environment. As you see, sand and dust storm both negatively and positively impact to the ecosystem by reducing the solar radiation, by adding nutrition to sea and water bodies, as a result might impact the number of phytoplanktons and the whole underwater ecosystem. It can impact natural vegetation, animal and soil quality as well. The deposition of dust on glacier ice darken the ice surface, and it makes the ice less reflective to solar radiation, resulting in the ice absorbing more of the sun rays and creating a warming effect. The overall outcome of an increasing in the increasing in melting rate, and so we can expect a greater flows of water even under the same meteorological condition, and subsequently it causes flood and end-season drought as the result of change in this hydrologic regime. In this assessment, we found out that the high dust deposition occur in the Himalaya Hindu Kush mountain range and the Tibetan plateau, the so-called third pole, which provides irrigation and drinking water, as well as generating electricity to more than 1.3 billion people in Asia, around 20% of the world population. The map shows the glacier in Asia and the Pacific and the exposure to sand and dust storm, as represented by the mirror to dust deposition data. The most noticeable feature of this map, as I mentioned, is the large exposure of glacier ice exposed to the high, some level of dust deposition in the Himalaya Hindu Kush mountain, as well as Tibetan plateau and the glacier of Tian Shan mountain and Pamir. The area of glacier exposed to dust deposition in the main river basins are shown in the graph in the right, and the area that covered by sand and dust storm. The next finding of this assessment is about the projection of sand and dust storm in the region. The risk of impact of sand and dust storm is projected to increase in 2030s in some areas due to extreme drought condition in part of Western Australia, as well as southeastern Turkey and Iran and Afghanistan. There are the three key areas around which our report identified possible collaboration for countries in the ESCAP region going forward. At the analysis throughout the report, clearly point out that there is a need to gain a deeper understanding of the socio-economic impacts of sand and dust storms. Clearly, there is also scope for further collaboration around coordinated monitoring of sand and dust storm and early warning system, including with the impact-based focus to timely forecast sand and dust storms. Finally, the report identifies specific geographic area and sectors that would benefit from coordinated action amongst the country in the region to mitigate some of the most critical risks posed by sand and dust storms. At last but not least, the assessment couldn't have happened without enormous support from our partners. You can see the list of a few here. The details are available in the acknowledgement section of the report. From this QR code, you can directly download the report from APDIM website. My colleague posted the link also in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amin and Dr. Toge, for the presentation and the incredibly hard work that went into this analysis. It gives me, as APDIM director, great pride to share this and launch this report today. It was a huge amount of work, and really very collaborative one. So I think we are running a little bit late, and whilst we would love to stay on, we do have to close on the time scheduled because of the ongoing committee discussions. So perhaps we leave the questions to later, and I would immediately pass the floor on to Alexander Alex Baklanov, the Science Officer in the Science and Innovation Department of the World Meteorological Organization. WMO has been a great partner to us. We held with WMO the very initial meeting that kind of launched this work, as well as WMO helped connect and open the doors to the sand and dust storm warning advisory system that Alex, I'm sure, will tell you more about right now. So as the whole early warning component of this work is so critical. So Alex, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Leticia. And now I'll share my screen. Just please confirm, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. First of all, from World Meteorological Organization, our congratulations is a really great work and great progress in this direction for our United Nations Sun and Dust Storm Coalition. And I would like to present our work where also we are contributing from WMO with Sun and Dust Storm Warning Advisory and Assessment System for risk assessment in Asia and Pacific. And it is together with our big team of SDS-WAS, and first of all, the chair of SDS-WAS Steering Committee, Professor Shaoyi Zhang, and also chair of Asia Node of SDS-WAS, Dr. Sangbun Ryo from Korean Meteorological Service. And first of all, I would like to inform about SDS-WAS. It is a global federation of partners system endorsed actually from 2007 by World Meteorological Congress, and organized around regional nodes, integrated research, operational and user communities, in particular for health, climate, energy, and agriculture, etc. And the main mission is to establish a coordinated global network of SDS research and forecasting centers, and to enhance the ability of countries to deliver forecast. First of all, our goal is forecast and observations, and also information and knowledge to different users and for partnership. As I mentioned, it is organized by regional nodes, and we have several centers. 3 regional nodes are working currently. And the most for the region, what we are discussing here, for Asia, we have regional node coordinated by regional center hosted by China Meteorological Administration in Beijing, and you can see the website of that. And another regional node partly also covering Asia and Middle East part. It's a regional node for North Africa, Middle East, and Europe, what we call NAMI. Coordinated by regional center as a consortium of Spanish Meteorological Agency and Barcelona Supercomputing Center. And the third Pan-American regional node hosted by Barbados and United States. And 2 of these centers, in particular Barcelona and Beijing, were appointed as operational regional specialized meteorological centers with activity specialization to atmospheric dust forecast by WMO. And globally, SDS-WAS is coordinated by Global Steering Committee, And we have science implementation plan, and the previous one was for 2015-2020, and now it will be for next 5 years. And of course, our activities within each regional node is realized for forecasting, first of all, as I mentioned, and also for monitoring and analysis, and also for early warning. So main components for users are for warning advisory and also for long-term assessment with reanalysis and seasonal forecast and climate change projection and multi-year trends. Here you can see some example of the products. First of all centers provide 72 hours forecast, and here you can see example of such forecast by Barcelona Center and by Beijing Center. And additionally, for long-term, we provide also multi-year dust assessment and long-term trends. And here you can see 2 examples of such reanalysis of average mean concentrations of dust over the globe in 2020, and the right picture demonstrates anomaly of annual mean surface concentration in 2020 relative to mean for 30 years period. And you can see some areas are increasing dusting and some areas decreasing, but mostly intensity is increasing. And this actually information was also provided for this report, what we are discussing here. Of course, it is also a research project, so emerging research issues are focusing on some limitation in knowledge and understanding of mechanism, where we put a lot of efforts, and advanced methods for forecasting and assessment. And of course, attribution and sources are in focus, and observations are extremely important. And of course, applications, what we are discussing here, and impact-based forecast. These main variables which are provided by centers, an example of the NAMI node. But of course, it is physical parameters and very important for applications, as we discussed in this event and nicely presented in this report. What APDIM demonstrate to use products of SDS-WAS for, first of all, for early warning, and impacts need to be analyzed for health, aviation, agriculture, economy with different warnings for early warning, and also for long-term assessment for policy and minimization of impact and damage from sun and dust storms. And of course, for this work, we need collaboration with other UN agencies, and great help with this also our collaboration with ESCAP and APDIM, and our also United Nations Sun and Dust Storm Coalition is focusing on this complex approach. And we are contributing now in SDS-WAS with 9 global models and also 15 regional models, and more than 30 organizations are doing that, and with these regional centers, what I mentioned. And of course, different nodes conducting reanalysis research, which will greatly support assessment for impact-based early warning in the coalition, what I mentioned. One example was Japanese Meteorological Administration provide for in ASEAN node for this reanalysis for this study and provided to ESCAP, APDIM, and Barcelona does Supercomputer Center also doing a new analysis with much higher resolution. Beijing does forecasting center in ASEAN node providing chemical weather coupling reanalysis for aerosols, including dust, and analyzing impact of dust and other type of aerosols on health and climate. And this, of course, part of our work for understanding of a role in anthropogenic and climate change impact for global and regional scale. And our work with WHO is now ongoing also for sun and dust storm health impact, and also current work was done together for model measurement fusion of observation, different type of observation and modeling. It's a nice example of applications our ASEAN node and China Beijing Center provided mobile app for informing about forecast and early warning, such a system for Asia. And here you can see example of such app for SDS, where ensemble of different models forecast is presented. And of course, SDS WAS is also providing scientific and technical emphasis for our priorities for projections due to climate change. And this one of example of our Japanese collaborators new project which is ongoing for analysis of sun and dust storm emission amount for projections to 2050. And here you can see some examples of preliminary studies. And also,
Alex, sorry, can you try to wrap it up in a couple of minutes?
Yes, I'm finalizing now. Yeah. And also impact-based forecast is focused, and this is just an example of ASEAN node forecast, what you can see from website for next 72 hours, but now it is prolonged for 168 hours forecast. And of course, an important part is observations, and our Korean colleagues provided a great program with satellite observation with new satellites. And of course, as I mentioned, the most important is economical impact for short-term and long-term assessments. And here we provide just the first part, and very important to continue this complex picture, and coordination and joint efforts of different UN agencies are absolutely necessary in this. And this ESCAP APDIM report, I think it's a very nice example of such collaboration, and we hope to continue our joint work as United Nations Sun and Dust Storm Coalition team. Thank you very much for your attention, and just finally some of our outreach activities and capacity building activities of SDS WAS, which we hope will continue together with APDIM and many other agencies together. And also we would like to answer on some questions and participate in discussion, especially what the head of ASEAN office of WMO, Dr. Ben Churchill, is participated here, so I hope he'll also join the discussion. Thank you very much, and good luck for continuation of your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and indeed a good opportunity to say hello to Ben Churchill, who's also online, and also a suggestion for all participants who have any questions to pop them into our chat box. It is, I see he just turned on his video, hello. I think this presentation of Alex really showed the kind of services and support that we together as United Nations, the World Meteorological Organization, can offer countries in the region to better understand, monitor, and prevent the impact of sand and dust storms, and really reduce as much as possible early warning, etc. So I was very grateful for this presentation by WMO, and now we move on to the next segment of our discussion, where we really like to invite countries to share with us their experience and their understanding. And we discussed two countries for this morning, Australia and Iran. For Australia, we would like to invite John Lees, Honorary Associate Professor at the Australian National University, visiting scientist and Honorary Scientific Research Fellow at New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. I think your title is just about longer than ours in APDIM, which is quite long. But John Lees, thank you so much for being with us. And also thank you for, I should mention, John Lees kindly agreed to peer review our study at the very end as an independent scientist expert on sand and dust storms. So we're grateful for his independent peer review our study. So the floor is yours, John. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Well, good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are. And I'd like to thank very much the organising committee for inviting me to this auspicious occasion. It's wonderful to see this report being launched today. Many of the photographs that are in the report actually come from Australia, which is encouraging, even though in the report it points out Australia really doesn't have many of the problems of many of our other countries in Asia and the Pacific. I'd first of all like to acknowledge I'm actually running a project called Dustwatch in Australia for the last 20 years. And the project began in Mildura, which is the picture on the front of the report. So we use community people to help us observe what's going on their landscape, and they send us photographs and information. The other collaborators are the Climate and Atmospheric Science branch within the Planning and Industry Environment Department. And we also use a lot of information from NASA and CSIRO. So thank you to them. So welcome to the Southern Oceania, Australia, New Zealand area of this talk. I'm going to talk to you a little about transboundary issues and a little bit about mitigating impact. So Australia is the largest dust source in the Southern Hemisphere, about 160 million tonnes per year. So it's tiny compared to the Northern Hemisphere, but it still creates quite a few problems for us here in Australia and New Zealand. So the most important thing is, I guess, Australia is an emitter. It doesn't have much, it doesn't have much dust coming into it. It tends to be a dust exporter. So as you can see in this example from a paper we published last year, there was a big dust storm in Central Australia. It came out through a place called Tamworth, PM10 for that hour, 6 o'clock, was 607 micrograms per cubic metre. It then travelled 2,500 kilometres across the Tasman Sea, where it went to New Zealand, and they had a PM10 of 127. Now these numbers are small compared to those measured in Asia, but they are quite large for the south, this part of the Pacific. The same dust storm continued on past New Zealand and ended up in Antarctica. And the literature is full of dust events which have gone to Antarctica, and the ice cores have been documenting dust coming out of Australia for tens of thousands of years and being transported to the south. So I guess in the intercontinental context, Australia is the source, and there are a few other places around us which either benefit or are punished by our dust emissions. So to the mitigating the impact. So as we've seen from the report, there are two sites of impacts. There's the soil erosion and burying of infrastructure and damage on site, and then there's the off-site. So there's the air quality and the dust deposition. So let's look at those within the Australian context. So one of the first things we do in Australia is we do a lot of measurements using satellites, and we're continually monitoring vegetation cover. We use different instruments, MODIS, Landsat and Sentinel, depending on the resolution. And then we produce this product called a fractional cover. It tells us what is green, which is the old NDVI. It tells us what is dead. And those two provide the ground cover. And we can see the amount of bare ground. What it gives us is maps like this. This is a Landsat map. And you can see here that these bright green areas up here, these are irrigation areas, as are these ones down here. There's a river corridor, but adjacent to those are very red areas. They're the bare areas. So that means they have no ground cover and are quite susceptible to erosion. The blue areas have dead cover or non-photosynthetic cover. So we use this sort of information a lot to look at where the dust sources might be and what areas are persistently bare so we can try and help farmers in those areas increase their ground cover. So how much cover do we need? We basically work on this concept of if we have about 50% ground cover in the agricultural areas and the rangelands, then we can reduce the amount of dust emission. So we look around the landscape for areas with low cover, and that's where we target our investments to try and help people increase their ground cover. To do this, we have a global product. There's a web link up at the top here. This data is updated every day, 8 days, and it provides monthly or 8-day maps of ground cover. So you can look at either what is the fractional cover, where it's bare, dead, or non-photosynthetic, or you look at the total cover. So this is the total cover map for this part of the world in July this year. And this is what it was in January at the beginning of 2021. So you can see between these two, in winter in Australia, the area exposed to wind erosion is small, but in the Northern Hemisphere it's high, and then it flips. Your area up here gets less and our area increases. So this is one of our major products that we use, and it's produced by CSIRO through this site. And you can download this data freely from the website. So the big issue on site is obviously soil erosion. As we heard in the opening address, there is lots of issues with overuse of country, and then you get dust emission and all the degradation responses. We also end up with our native vegetation being buried and our infrastructure being buried. These are just some of the impacts. So what we're doing about it is we're trying to have education programs which go right across Australia. We have a program called the National Land Care Program. It's an Australian government program, and it works with the 56 different regional groups to try and overcome erosion problems, biodiversity problems, ecosystem problems. Where they do that is basically from this map. This is a modelled map of where the wind erosion in Australia on agricultural land has the highest priority for us to invest in. So these red areas, which are the semi-arid parts, and the yellow areas are where the investment is targeted. We target the investment there because dust travels long distances. You need to address the problem at source, even though the impact in Australia is thousands of kilometres away. So in this work by Aloxon, he looked at 9 different cities on the eastern seaboard of Australia and backtracked the dust to see where it came from. And as you can see, most of it comes out of the lower Lake Eyre Basin, down into southern Victoria, the Riverina. So these became the priority areas for investment. But when the dust, like in this dust storm here, comes to Sydney, so this is a daily concentration of over 7,000 micrograms of PM10, it looks like this. So this large dust event in September 2009, we estimate about 2.5 million tonnes of soil was blown off the Australian coast. The dust event cost about $299 million to the New South Wales economy in that one dust event. Most of that was with cleaning up after the dust event and the stopping of transport and the halting of all work on all industrial work. Building sites was closed. It also has an impact on air quality, which has an impact on health. And so in the February 2019 was another event in which there was about 161 respiratory and 7 cardiovascular disease hospitalisations, and a number of deaths were also recorded. These numbers are small, I recognise, compared to other places in Central Asia, but in Australia these become quite important for a policy setting. So what do we want to do about it? It's all about air quality forecasting for these large capital cities and areas of population. So basically the New South Wales, southeastern Australia, basically, Department of Planning, Industry and Environment has a forecast system which uses observational methods, instruments on the ground, trajectory modelling, numerical modelling and statistical modelling, all to come up with an ensemble of products which are used to put out health impact assessments. So how it works is the routine data and information comes in. It then goes before a panel who looks at all the meteorological conditions and make a decision. Is the air quality forecast for the large capital areas going to be good, fair or poor? If it's good, it goes out as a good air cost. If it's a poor, then a number of things happen. There's automatic forecasts alerts sent to people's phones who are interested in air quality. It goes out through public affairs, so there is information in the media, and the Bureau of Meteorology is notified, and they put it out through their forecasts on the evening news. But the operational forecast relies on these several things. One I said was these on-ground sensors. These are a mixture of TOMs and PM10 monitors like dust tracks. The hourly is published daily, hourly on the web, so the community can see them, and they can track the dust as it comes across themselves, or they can look at the dust forecasts. The dust forecasts are based on mainly this visualization from AOD work, aerosol optical depth, and corrected reflectance data that we get from the MODIS satellite. We also use Himwari satellite to track dust plumes. If we do get dust plumes being emitted, we can quickly model them to see where they're going to go. So there is normally a downwind modeling to see, will these dust plumes hit the large capital areas? And if they do, then that increases the confidence. That's the second line of evidence. And the third line of evidence that we use is a model, and the modelling looks at, and this is a modelling event for July this year, where we had a large wind front come through. The red areas here are the dust emission being picked up, and as you can see, it then propagates into a front, and that's carried forward towards the east coast. So this modelling is then used to also aid in the forecasting. So you can see there's a number of lines of evidence which are used for forecasting. So in conclusion, basically Australia is Southern Hemisphere's largest dust emitter. We don't receive dust, but we do export it, especially to New Zealand and Antarctica. Some of the benefits of dust actually is that it improves the phytoplankton in the Southern Ocean, and that increases fish stocks, but basically it's all about, there mainly are negative impacts. Due to this environmental threat, Australia has these programs mainly about stopping the dust in the first place through the National Land Care Program. So that's working with farmers and land managers to try and increase their ground cover. And for the capital centres, we do have these dust storm warning systems which work on about a 24-hour to 12-hour warning. So people are warned before the dust enters into the large population centres. So that's a little story from South Australia. And as we began with a photograph of Mildura on the front of the report, we're going to finish with one. This one was taken in 1966. As you can see, it's a black and white photograph which has been stitched together. But these dust storms have been coming into the Mildura area for many, many years. And we've just done an analysis that shows that the dust storms in this area are probably about 3 to 6 times less than they were in the 1940s. So I guess it shows in Australia that the land management is improving, and we are slowly trying to mitigate these dust events, even though we do get a few from time to time. So, any questions?
Thank you, John. I'm afraid we do not have the time for the questions, but I do encourage all participants who do have questions to pop them into the chat line and address them to you directly. But really, really interesting presentation, combining very much the mitigation with the analysis, which is key to our approach, really. So thank you for that. And without further ado, I would like to now invite Dr. Tahmasbi Mirghani, Chair of the National Committee to Combat Sand and Dust Storms in the Department of Environment in the Islamic Republic of Iran, to share his thoughts and in his presentations with us. Dr. Tahmasbi, over to you.
Thank you, Leticia. In the name of God, first, I would like to thank ESCAP and APDIM for organizing this webinar and related effort on environment, disaster, and especially sand and dust storm in Asia and the Pacific region. Recent studies show that over 19% of Islamic Republic of Iran are affected by internal and external dust sources. Accordingly, combating SDS is a main priority for the country, and over 400 million euros have been allocated for related programs over the last 5 years. One of the vital aspects and top priority issues related to sand and dust storm for Islamic Republic of Iran is the close collaboration with neighbor countries to manage, adapt, and combat sand and dust issue in the area. In this regard, I would like to ask my colleague, Mr. Dr. Tamasebi from Kharazmi University, to briefly present the relevant activities, achievement, recommendation, and suggestion on sand and dust storm in Islamic Republic of Iran. Thank you. Please, Dr. Tamasebi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamasebi, for your invitation, and I would like to thank the APDIM and organizer of this very interesting meeting and having us in this fruitful meeting. I wonder if my screen are already shared.
We can see your screen. The presentation, I expect, might be up soon because we see a Google page.
Right now?
Yes.
Very good.
Well, welcome. Might I ask you to stick to the time because we are...
Yeah, very briefly, I will give a very brief report on the measures and program implemented by Islamic Republic of Iran. As my colleague mentioned, the sand and dust storm is a major concern for the country, and several initiatives have been implemented over the last decade. As we mentioned, we have established a national management committee and also identified dust source in the country. And also another study that we have identified the environmental and ecological damage of dust storm in 6 main provinces which are affected by dust storm in the country. And 2 national action plan has been developed. For the first one is the national action plan to combat sand and dust storm, and also the second one is the national adaptation action plan to combat sand and dust storm. And then it shows that we, along with the mitigation approach, we are also trying to adopt and enhance the capacity of socio-ecological system to cope and adopt with the consequences of sand and dust storm in the country. As Dr. Thomas mentioned.
Sorry to interrupt you. We can't see your presentation as yet. I'm just checking with my colleagues if we can perhaps share it ourselves for you. We can share it.
Yes. Sorry, Dr. Tamasebi. I think you might share the wrong screen. If you're using 2 screens, probably you need to share the other one.
Right now it's okay?
Yes. Just please make it full screen.
Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
It's fine, yeah? Thank you very much. This slide showing the identification of sand and dust storm region sources in Iran in 3 different categories of very severe, moderate, and low activities. And based on this evaluation, we can say that over 34 million hectares of the country is source for internal dust storm in the country, and which is almost over 20% of the country. But and based on this evaluation, a lot of measures and projects has been implemented in the country over the last 5 years, and you can see the list of main activities implemented here. But I want to move to the next slide and show that beside Iran, and if we have a broader picture of the sand and dust storm event in our region, we can see that almost all countries in our neighbor countries are affected by sand and dust storm, and we have sand and dust storm sources in our region which may affect our country and our neighboring countries. So it is very important to have a regional approach to combat sand and dust storm. In this line of approach and in this regard, Islamic Republic of Iran have taken several initiatives and activities, and which is in collaboration with international organizations such as UNEP, UNDP, ESCAP, and also participate in different meetings and organizations of relevant meetings and conferences, and also we exchange several bilateral and multilateral agreements with neighbor countries, including Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Qatar, and so on. And the lists are also presented here. And it shows that the collaboration with the neighboring countries and international organizations is the main priority for the country. And also in 2014, with the initiation of UNEP, regional master plan for West Asia has developed and finalized in 2004. Based on these experiences and background, in 2020, we started a new evaluation of the dust storm sources in the region, and also evaluation of the previous experiences. It was a joint project with my university, Kharazmi University, Iranian Atmospheric Science Meteorological Research Institute, and also National Sand and Dust Storm Management Committee and EPO, and we come up with two sub-regional action plan, which is based on three main approaches. The first one, as I mentioned, was on the based on the regional dust storm source identification. The second approach was the integration of social, economic, environmental aspects of sand and dust storm in the region. And the third one is the combination of mitigation and adaptation approach to manage the impact of sand and dust storm. These two sub-regional action plan is developed for the first one was developed for West Asia. The numbers here are showing the critical sources identified for dust storm in the region, and as you can see here in this slide, a number of neighboring countries have involved, have been is necessary to join in this regional action plan. For drafting this action plan, we examined the national communication of this country's report to UNCCD, as well as their report on the source and measures on combating sand and dust storm in the countries. And the second sub-regional action plan is developed for Central Asia and part of West Asia, including Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. As you can see here, three main dust sources are identified in this slide, are showing. And we believe that this document framework provide very good ground for further elaboration of this document, and with the participation of the affected countries and also international organizations such as APDIM and UNEP and other organizations. So we really welcome the neighboring countries and also international organizations, and encourage them to take this initiative to develop and finalize this sub-regional action plan and to put in the practice. We believe that the sand and the storm, beyond this negative impact, could bring the country together to work together for a prosperous life and sustainable environment for all people in this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamasevi, and really interesting presentation, and very much in the spirit of the work, with the intention within which this work has been conducted. With that, if Dr. Tamasevi also from the National Committee has no additional points, we could wrap up this part of the conversation with warm thanks for your participation. And always, as I thank the Islamic Republic of Iran, who is the host country for APDIM. We are in Tehran, in a beautiful building, the Sepand building, and hopefully very soon we'll all be able to have these meetings in person in Tehran. So I, again, do reach out, let us know if you have any questions. The recording will be available on our website. The report is also available on our website. And maybe to wrap up the meeting, I can just briefly highlight the 3 areas that we thought would be important for further discussion at regional level. A deeper understanding of the socioeconomic impacts of sand and dust storms. We developed a methodology, as Amin explained to you in details. This methodology is now available. If you wish to take a look at the problem at a more in a more granular way at national level, we stand ready to work with countries in the region to provide that kind of technical support to look further and more in depth with this approach, multi-sectoral approach. We definitely saw the need for a coordinated monitoring and early warning system with an impact-based focus to timely forecast sand and dust storms and enable targeted measures to minimize exposure and reduce risks. And that's why the conversation with the World Meteorological Organization is so important to us, and welcome very much their participation in the meeting and throughout our collaboration. And then, of course, coordinated actions in most at-risk and exposed geographic areas with a view to mitigating the risk. We heard the presentation from Australia. It needs to be worked at the source, but it needs to be worked also in the impact area with mitigating measures. And the presentation also from Iran clearly highlighted the regional dimension of the problem. And that's why just a few weeks ago, we had a really interesting conversation with our colleagues in ESCAWA, which brought together participants from both the regions covered by ESCAP and ESCAWA to discuss this problem. So I think we're charting the way, and there is scope for follow-up discussion and really pull all of these elements together and go towards strategic action at regional level on these key elements. In wrapping up, allow me also to thank the team, the APDIM team that has worked so tirelessly for this report. You heard from Amin Shamsedini, but also Mustafa Mohageg, the senior coordinator, who very much contributed to the work, and Ava Barami, who many of you saw her name in your emails. She's our communication officer and helped very much with the production of the report. And she will be very grateful, as will I be very grateful, if you help us spread the word about this. We have a plan, we have a strategy, social media, retweets, press releases, spread the word, LinkedIn, on Twitter. We try to make people aware of this work and the findings and the interest that it generates. I'm afraid I'm not able to take comments right now because there is an intergovernmental discussion going on, and I will be severely punished if I'm not wrapping this up on time. And so I would like to invite all participants in this event to return to the Kudo link for the 7th session of the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction, where they will start the deliberations on agenda item 6, other matters. So thank you so very much to all speakers and participants, and we will continue to discuss this issue in the coming weeks and months. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.